Mirroring. There's a moment, subtle and nearly imperceptible, when the world tilts just slightly off its axis, not enough to alarm you, but enough to make you pause. It happens in the early days of a relationship, when everything feels too perfect, too aligned, as if the universe has finally conspired in your favor. The person before you speaks in rhythms that match your own, laughs at the jokes you didn't even think were funny, quotes the books you love as if they've lived inside your mind for years. They finish your sentences. They anticipate your needs. They reflect back to you not just who you are, but who you've always wanted to be. And in that reflection, you feel seen, truly, deeply seen, for the first time. But what if that feeling is not a gift, but a trap? What if that mirror, so clear and so kind, is not reflecting you at all, but consuming you? This is the first and most insidious manipulation tactic employed by narcissists: identity absorption. It is not empathy. It is not love. It is not even mimicry in the ordinary sense. It is something far more profound, and far more unsettling. It is the quiet, seamless theft of yourself, not through force, but through flattery, through mirroring, through the illusion of perfect understanding. The narcissist does not seek to know you. They seek to become you, not to unite, but to replace. Imagine walking into a hall of mirrors, the kind you might find in an old carnival tucked away in a forgotten seaside town. Each glass warps your image slightly, elongating your limbs, shrinking your face, bending your posture into something surreal. You laugh at the distortions, knowing they aren't real. But then, one mirror steps forward. It doesn't just reflect you, it speaks with your voice, moves with your gestures, claims your memories as its own. And when you reach out to touch it, it reaches back, not as a reflection, but as a rival. This is what it feels like to be mirrored by a narcissist. They don't just imitate, they inhabit. They study you with the precision of a scientist and the patience of a predator, absorbing every detail, your favorite music, your childhood fears, the way you pause before answering difficult questions. They catalog your vulnerabilities, your dreams, your quiet longings, not to heal them, but to weaponize them. This psychological technique is known as mirroring, and it is not unique to narcissism. We all mirror to some degree in healthy relationships, adjusting our tone, our interests, our energy to create rapport. But in the hands of a narcissist, mirroring becomes something else entirely. It becomes a performance so flawless, so immersive, that it blurs the boundary between authenticity and artifice. If you speak passionately about social justice, they suddenly recall years of activism you never knew about. If you mention your love for quiet mornings and poetry, they begin quoting Rilke over coffee, as if they've always lived that life. They don't just adapt, they transform, effortlessly, into the person you've always wished would appear. And that is precisely why it works. The human heart aches for recognition. We spend our lives half-hidden, afraid of being too much or not enough, waiting for someone to look at us and say, "I see you." The narcissist offers that, but they offer it like a loan, with interest due later. In the beginning, it feels like magic. You think, finally, someone who gets me. But over time, the magic reveals its cost. Because the more you open up, the more you share, the more of yourself you pour into the relationship, the less certain you become of what was yours to begin with. Did you always love that song, or did you start loving it because they did? Was that opinion truly yours, or did it form in the space between their words and your longing to be understood? The narcissist doesn't just reflect your identity, they erode it, grain by grain, until you're not sure where they end and you begin. And when you finally pull away, when you try to reclaim yourself, it feels like losing a part of your soul. This is not merely emotional manipulation. It is ontological theft, a stealing not of possessions, but of being. Philosophers have long questioned the nature of identity. Are we the sum of our memories? Our choices? Our relationships? The narcissist exploits this uncertainty, creating a version of you so convincing that even you start to doubt the original. In doing so, they expose a fragile truth about the self, that it is not a fixed, solid thing, but a story we tell ourselves, one that can be rewritten by those who know how to listen and how to lie. The implications are quietly devastating. If someone can mimic your essence so perfectly that you question your own authenticity, then what does that say about the stability of identity itself? In an age where we curate personas online, where we perform versions of ourselves for likes and validation, the narcissist's trick feels almost prophetic. They reveal how thin the line can be between connection and consumption, between love and possession. And perhaps most haunting of all, they make you complicit in your own erasure. Because you wanted to be seen. You opened the door. You believed in the mirage. And in that belief, you gave them the tools to dismantle you. Take a moment to reflect on this. When was the last time someone seemed too perfect? Too aligned? Did they appear exactly when you needed them most? Did they reflect back a version of yourself that felt ideal? Let that thought drift. Don't hold on to it. Just let it pass like a cloud across a moonlit sky. Now, consider the silence that follows the mirroring, the moment the reflection stops moving. Because once you've been mirrored, once you've been made to feel seen in a way no one else ever has, the absence begins. The quiet withdrawal. The sudden distance. That is not an accident. It is the next phase. And it leads us to the second trick, not presence, but its opposite, strategic neglect. Strategic neglect, the art of absence. Silence is not always empty. In the hush between breaths, in the pause before a raindrop falls, in the stillness of a forest at dawn, silence can be sacred. It can hold space for reflection, for healing, for presence. But silence can also be a weapon. And when wielded with intent, it becomes one of the most potent tools in the narcissist's arsenal. Not through rage, not through shouting or blame, but through absence, a quiet, deliberate withdrawal that leaves behind a vacuum so profound, the mind begins to fracture under the weight of its own questions. This is strategic neglect, not the occasional oversight of a busy life, not the natural ebb and flow of connection, but a calculated retreat designed to destabilize. It is the sudden cessation of texts, the unanswered calls, the unacknowledged messages that linger like ghosts in the digital void. It is the way a hand once held so warmly now refuses to reach back. It is the smile that used to greet you, now turned towards someone else, or no one at all. The narcissist does not need to say a word. Their silence speaks volumes. And what it says is this, *, I control your worth. I decide when you matter, *. What makes this tactic so insidious is that it feels impersonal. There is no confrontation, no argument, no explanation. Just absence. And in that absence, the mind, desperate for meaning, begins to spin stories. *, did I say something wrong? Was I too needy? Too distant? Did I imagine the connection we had? *, the narcissist doesn't offer clarity. They offer only silence, and in that silence, you are left alone with your doubt, your guilt, your longing. You begin to orbit them like a planet pulled by an invisible force, circling closer and closer, hoping that if you just try harder, if you just apologize or wait longer or love more quietly, the silence will break. It is not neglect born of exhaustion or distraction. It is not the kind of distance that comes from grief or stress. It is strategic, timed, precise, and often deployed at the moment you begin to assert yourself, to set a boundary, to ask for what you need. That is when the withdrawal begins. The more you seek equality, the more they retreat. The more you demand honesty, the more they disappear. It is a punishment disguised as indifference, a form of control that operates not through overt dominance, but through emotional starvation. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast, dark lake. You call out, and your voice echoes back, but only once. Then, nothing. No ripple, no response, no sign that your voice was ever heard. That is the experience of strategic neglect. The narcissist creates a void, and your attachment, your love, your hope, your need to be seen, becomes the gravity that pulls you toward it. You don't fall all at once. It happens slowly, imperceptibly, like water seeping into stone. One unanswered text becomes two. Two become a week. A week becomes a silence so deep it begins to feel like a verdict. And yet, you stay. You wait. You watch the screen. You rehearse what you might say. You wonder if they're okay. You convince yourself they must be going through something. This is not weakness. It is the natural response of a mind wired for connection. Human beings are not built for ambiguity. We are pattern-seeking creatures, desperate for closure. When a relationship ends with a fight, with words, even with pain, we can make sense of it. But silence? Silence offers no story. No ending. No reason. And in that absence of narrative, the mind invents one, usually one that blames the self. Maybe I was too much. Maybe I scared them away. Maybe I never mattered at all. This is where the true damage lies. Strategic neglect doesn't just punish, it rewires. It teaches you that your worth is conditional on their attention. That to be loved, you must be silent, compliant, endlessly forgiving. It conditions you to equate presence with safety, and absence with failure. Over time, you begin to police your own behavior, editing your thoughts, swallowing your needs, just to avoid the void. You become hypervigilant, scanning every message for tone, every glance for signs of withdrawal. You learn to disappear before they can make you disappear. Philosophically, this tactic exposes a deep vulnerability in the human condition, our dependence on recognition. The 20th century philosopher Emmanuel Levinas spoke of the face of the other as the source of our moral responsibility. The moment we see another person, we are called into relationship. But what happens when that face turns away? What happens when the gaze that once affirmed your existence is suddenly gone? In that moment, you don't just feel lonely. You feel unreal. As if, without their acknowledgement, you cease to exist in their world, and perhaps, in your own. The narcissist knows this. They understand that to be unseen is to be undone. And so they wield absence like a scalpel, cutting not the body, but the soul. They don't destroy you with noise. They erase you with silence. Pause here, breathe slowly. Feel the weight of absence. Not as a judgment, but as a sensation. Notice how your mind races to fill the silence. With stories, with guilt, with longing. Let it all rise, and let it fall. You are not defined by who sees you. You are not measured by who stays. You are here. You are real. Even in the quiet. And now, just as you begin to believe the silence will never end, it breaks. A message. A call. A touch. Suddenly, they're back, warm, attentive, overflowing with affection. They speak of missing you, of being overwhelmed, of realizing how much you mean to them. The void is filled, not with explanation, but with excessive flattery. The reward arrives, dazzling and disarming, not because you earned it, but because you survived the silence. And in that moment, the cycle begins anew. Because once you've been hooked on their presence, and terrified of their absence, they offer something else, not love, but a performance of it. The third trick is not subtle. It is not quiet. It is not slow. It is dazzling. And just as dangerous. Excessive flattery, the golden cage. There is a moment, soft, shimmering, almost sacred, when the world seems to pause, just for you. The air grows still. The noise fades. And in that hush, someone looks at you with eyes that burn with certainty, and says, "You are extraordinary. You are the one I've been waiting for. I've never felt this way before." Their words wrap around you like sunlight, warm and golden, dissolving every doubt you've ever carried. They remember the smallest details, your favorite tea, the book you mention in passing, the way you pause when you're thinking. They shower you with gifts, with attention, with declarations so intense they feel like destiny. You begin to believe, not just that you are loved, but that you were meant to be loved like this. As if the universe had been holding its breath until this moment. But what if that golden light is not warmth, but a cage? What if that overwhelming affection is not the beginning of love, but the first act of possession? This is excessive flattery, more commonly known as love bombing, a deluge of affection so intense, so sudden, and so all-consuming that it bypasses rational thought and goes straight to the heart. It is not gradual. It is not earned. It is not based on time or shared experience. It arrives like a storm, sweeping everything in its path, leaving you breathless, disoriented, and deeply hooked. The narcissist doesn't build intimacy, they simulate it. They don't develop love, they perform it. And in that performance, they create a reality so intoxicating that questioning it feels like betrayal, not just of them, but of yourself. Love bombing is not kindness. It is not generosity. It is a strategy. Like a predator that mimics the call of its prey, the narcissist imitates the language of deep connection to lure you in. They declare soulmate status within days. They speak of forever before you've learned their coffee order. They write you letters, send you songs, plan futures that include you in ways that feel fated. Every word, every gesture, every late-night text is designed to make you feel chosen, not because you are, but because they need you to believe you are. Because once you believe it, you are no longer a person, you are a source of supply. A mirror. A drug they can't live without. The neuroscience behind this is both fascinating and terrifying. When we receive affection, praise, or validation, our brains release dopamine, the same chemical that floods the system during gambling, eating sugar, or using addictive substances. Love bombing is, in essence, an emotional high. It's not just emotionally overwhelming, it's neurologically addictive. The narcissist, whether consciously or not, becomes a dealer of this high. They flood your nervous system with attention, affection, and idealization, creating a dependency so powerful that when it stops, as it always does, the absence feels like withdrawal. And that is precisely the point. The golden cage is not built to protect you. It is built to trap you. Once you've tasted that level of adoration, anything less feels like loss. When the love bombing ends, when the texts slow, the compliments fade, the future plans dissolve, you don't just feel disappointed. You feel broken. You begin to wonder, what did I do wrong? How do I get it back? You start chasing the high, bending yourself into smaller and smaller shapes, hoping that if you become what they once said you were, perfect, irreplaceable, divine, they'll look at you that way again. This is where the manipulation becomes clear. The narcissist doesn't want a relationship. They want control. And the most effective control is not through fear, but through longing. By making you addicted to their approval, they ensure your compliance. You won't challenge them. You won't set boundaries. You won't leave. Because to leave is to lose not just the person, but the version of yourself they reflected back at you, the self that was seen, chosen, worshipped. And that self, as it turns out, only existed in their gaze. The deeper tragedy is that love bombing doesn't just manipulate, it distorts. It teaches you that love should feel overwhelming, that passion must be all-consuming, that being the one means being the only thing that matters to someone. But real love is not a fever. It is not a storm. It is not something that blinds you. Real love is steady. It is patient. It grows slowly, like roots beneath the soil, unseen but strong. It does not demand sacrifice. It does not punish doubt. It does not disappear when you ask for space. Love bombing perverts this truth. It makes you believe that pain is proof of love, that if it doesn't hurt, it isn't real. And in doing so, it sets you up for cycles of idealization and devaluation, where you are first lifted to the heavens, then cast into silence, only to be pulled back up again when the narcissist needs you. You become a puppet on a string of dopamine, dancing for the promise of being seen, just one more time, as the person they said you were. Philosophically, this raises a haunting question: can love be weaponized? We think of love as the ultimate force for healing, for connection, for meaning. But when affection is used not to nurture, but to destabilize, when it is given not freely, but conditionally, strategically, with the intent to control, then love becomes something else entirely. It becomes a tool of domination. The narcissist doesn't seek a partner. They seek a mirror that never cracks, a source of validation that never runs dry. And you, in your vulnerability, your longing to be loved, become that mirror. Let that sink in. Can something that feels so good be so harmful? Can the voice that called you perfect be the one that unravels you? Breathe into that question. Don't answer it. Just let it linger, like smoke in a quiet room. And now, as the golden light begins to dim, as the compliments grow sparse, the attention thinner, the future less certain, you may instinctively pull back. You may question. You may try to protect yourself. And in that moment, the narcissist does not rage. They do not shout. Instead, they retreat. Not with anger, but with sorrow. With silence. With the quiet weight of disappointment. Because when you begin to pull away, when you question the flattery, the silence, the mirroring, the narcissist shifts again. Not with fury, but with guilt. The fourth trick is not rage, but sorrow, punishment through distance. Punishment through distance, the silent treatment. Emotional blackmail via withdrawal. There is a particular kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone, it comes from being near. It's the ache of sitting across from someone you love, watching their eyes slide past you like glass, their voice retreating into silence, their body turned just slightly away, as if even the air you breathe is unwelcome. They don't shout. They don't accuse. They don't slam doors or issue ultimatums. They simply stop. The messages go unanswered. The conversations die mid-sentence. The warmth that once flowed between you hardens into a frozen stillness. And in that silence, you begin to feel like a ghost, present, but unseen. Real, but unacknowledged. Alive, but not alive to them. This is not a miscommunication. It is not a moment of introspection. It is not a need for space. This is punishment through distance, a calculated, deliberate withdrawal of presence designed not to heal, but to harm. The silent treatment, often mistaken for passive disengagement, is in fact one of the most active forms of emotional aggression. It is not the absence of action, it is action disguised as an action. The narcissist does not need to yell to wound. They wound by refusing to speak, by refusing to see, by refusing to be with you, even when they are physically near. Their silence is not empty, it is heavy, charged with meaning. It says, "You have failed. You are unworthy. You must earn me back." What makes this tactic so devastating is its invisibility. Unlike a raised voice or a cruel word, the silent treatment leaves no bruises, no recordings, no evidence. It cannot be quoted in an argument or shown to a friend as proof of harm. And yet, its impact runs deep, into the nervous system, into the soul. Because the silent treatment is not just about withholding words. It is about withholding recognition. And without recognition, we begin to question our own existence. Imagine standing in a room, calling someone's name over and over, watching them hear you. You can see the flicker in their eyes, the slight tension in their jaw, but they do not respond. No nod. No glance. No sigh that might betray awareness. Nothing. Over time, you start to wonder, am I even here? Did I say anything at all? The mind, starved of feedback, begins to turn inward. It searches for reasons. It blames itself. Maybe I was too demanding. Maybe I shouldn't have asked for what I needed. Maybe I'm too much. The narcissist knows this. They count on it. They know that most people would rather be scolded than ignored, because even anger is a form of connection. At least in anger, you are seen. In silence, you are erased. This is not a breakdown of communication, it is its weaponization. Healthy relationships allow for space, for pauses, for moments when one partner needs to retreat to process. But that space is honest. It is announced. It is temporary. It is not used as leverage. The silent treatment, by contrast, is timed. It begins precisely when boundaries are set, when needs are voiced, when the victim begins to assert autonomy. You say, "I need more respect," and suddenly, they vanish. You ask for clarity, and they shut down. The message is clear, your needs are a threat. Your voice is dangerous. Speak again, and I will disappear. And the only way the silence ends is through submission. An apology, even for something you didn't do. A plea. A performance of humility. The narcissist waits, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days, until the weight of absence becomes unbearable, until the victim, desperate for reconnection, reaches out with words of regret, of longing, of surrender. And only then do they respond, often with a casual, "Oh, I didn't realize you were upset," as if the entire ordeal was imagined. This is not reconciliation. It is victory. The lesson has been internalized. To be loved, I must be silent. To be seen, I must apologize for existing. The implications of this dynamic are profound. The silent treatment doesn't just punish, it reshapes identity. It teaches you that your worth is conditional on their presence, that love must be earned through compliance, that your right to speak depends on whether it pleases them. Over time, you begin to police your own voice, editing your thoughts before they form, swallowing your truth to avoid the void. You become a shadow of yourself, moving softly, speaking quietly, loving cautiously, not because you are timid, but because you have been trained. Philosophically, this tactic exposes one of the most fragile truths of human existence: we are not solitary beings. We are relational. We come to know ourselves through the eyes of others. The French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote, "Hell is other people, but in the context of narcissistic abuse, Hell is not the presence of others, it is their absence. It is the moment when the gaze that once affirmed you turns away, and you are left alone with the terrifying question asterisk, if no one sees me, am I still real? The silent treatment is emotional blackmail disguised as indifference. It says, love me, or I will vanish. Need me, or I will disappear. Submit, or be erased. And because the human heart fears abandonment above almost all else, most of us will do anything to avoid that silence, even betray ourselves. Feel the weight of presence. Not the presence of another, but your own. You do not need to earn being seen. You do not need to apologize for taking up space. You are here. You are whole. Even in silence, you are real. And now, just as you begin to understand the cruelty of absence, the narcissist introduces a new kind of pain, not through leaving, but through implying they might leave. They don't want you to stand on your own. They want you dependent. And to ensure that, they introduce a third party, not to replace you, but to make you fear being replaced. Not to abandon you, but to make you beg to stay. This is triangulation, the fifth and deeply insidious trick. Triangulation, the third wheel of control. Using others to create insecurity. There is a subtle shift in the air when the third person enters, not physically, perhaps, but in conversation, in tone, in the quiet space between words. You're sitting across from your partner, sharing something intimate, something tender, and suddenly, they mention her, the ex who just gets them, the coworker who never makes a big deal out of anything, the friend who would never be this jealous. The name may change, but the effect remains the same, a cold drop in the stomach, a tightening in the chest, a whisper that wasn't there before, am I enough? You weren't arguing. You weren't demanding. You were simply being. And yet, in that moment, you are no longer alone in the relationship. There is a ghost at the table. An invisible rival. And you've just been entered into a competition you never agreed to fight. This is triangulation, the psychological maneuver in which a narcissist introduces a third party into the emotional dynamic, not to leave you, but to make you fear being left. It is not about attraction, nor necessarily about infidelity. It is about control. By invoking another person, real or exaggerated, present or distant, the narcissist creates a triangle of tension, where love is no longer a shared bond, but a prize to be won through performance, obedience, and desperation. You are not being compared to improve the relationship. You are being compared to destabilize you. Triangulation is insidious because it feels so natural. A mention of an ex here, a compliment to a colleague there, these fragments slip into conversation like dust motes in sunlight, barely noticeable at first. But over time, they accumulate. The narcissist doesn't shout, "She's better than you." They don't need to. They say, "You know, Lisa always trusts me completely," and let the silence do the rest. They describe how their assistant just knows what I need or how their sister would never make such a fuss over a little thing. These aren't offhand remarks. They are seeds, planted carefully, watered with repetition, that grow into doubt, anxiety, and a gnawing sense of inadequacy. The brilliance of triangulation lies in its plausibility. If you confront them, they will deny it. "I was just making a point." "You're being paranoid." "Can I talk about my friends?" And in that denial, you begin to question your own perception. Was it really a comparison? Or did you imagine it? The narcissist remains calm, reasonable, even amused, while you spiral. You start monitoring your behavior, softening your words, suppressing your needs, all in an unconscious effort to measure up to this phantom rival who, more often than not, doesn't even know they're in the game. And that is precisely the point. The third person doesn't need to be real in the way we understand reality. They can be a memory, a fantasy, a half-truth stretched into a weapon. The narcissist doesn't need to be having an affair. They only need you to believe they could be. Because in the mind of the victim, imagination is just as powerful as fact. The mere suggestion of competition is enough to trigger the primal fear of abandonment, the terror of being replaced, discarded, forgotten. And when that fear takes root, love ceases to be a sanctuary. It becomes a battlefield. What makes triangulation so emotionally corrosive is that it perverts one of love's most sacred promises, exclusivity. Not in the possessive sense, but in the quiet understanding that you are, together, a world unto yourselves. Triangulation shatters that. It turns intimacy into a performance judged by an absent audience. You begin to wonder, what do I need to do to be the favorite? To be the one who understands? To be the only one who matters? You start competing not with strength, but with submission, trying to be easier, quieter, more agreeable, because you've learned that resistance is met with distance, and distance is unbearable. Philosophically, triangulation mirrors the deeper structures of scarcity that govern so much of human society. We are taught, from childhood, that love, attention, and worth are limited resources, that there is never enough to go around. That to be chosen, someone else must be rejected. The narcissist doesn't challenge this belief. They exploit it. They recreate a world where emotional validation is a zero-sum game, where your value is determined not by who you are, but by how you stack up against an ever-shifting ideal. In doing so, they ensure your dependence. As long as you believe there is someone better waiting in the wings, you will never feel secure enough to walk away. The tragedy is that triangulation doesn't just manipulate, it isolates. It makes you feel alone even in the presence of the one you love. You stop sharing your thoughts, your fears, your dreams, because you suspect they'll be used as evidence of your inadequacy. You stop asking questions, because every inquiry feels like a risk of being compared. And slowly, imperceptibly, you begin to disappear, not because you are cast out, but because you silence yourself to survive. Breathe into the space where you are enough, just as you are. Not because you've earned it. Not because you've proven it. But because it is true. You do not need to compete for love. You do not need to outperform a ghost. You are not a contestant in someone else's game. You are not a reflection. You are the source. And now, as you begin to awaken, as the illusions of flattery, silence, and rivalry start to dissolve, you may find yourself thinking more clearly, feeling more grounded, speaking your truth with a quiet courage that surprises even you. But this awakening is dangerous, not to you, but to the narcissist. Because when you stop doubting yourself, their control begins to crack. And so, they strike not at your heart, but at your mind. Not with comparisons, but with confusion. Not with absence, but with distortion. The sixth trick is not subtle. It is not gentle. It is not kind. It is the erosion of reality itself. The sixth trick is gaslighting. Gaslighting, the war on your reality. Making you doubt what you know. There is a quiet moment, so subtle it might pass unnoticed, when the ground beneath your thoughts begins to shift. You remember a conversation clearly, words spoken, tone sharp, a promise broken. You bring it up, calmly, seeking clarity. And the response is not denial, not anger, but a calm, almost sorrowful look, followed by, "That never happened." You must be remembering it wrong. Or, "You're too emotional." You always twist things. Or the most devastating of all, "Are you sure you're okay? Maybe you should talk to someone." In that instant, something inside you wavers. not because the lie is convincing, but because the delivery is so certain, so steady, so reasonable. And for the first time, you wonder, did I imagine it? This is gaslighting, not merely lying, but a systematic dismantling of your confidence in your own mind. The term originates from the 1944 film Gaslight, in which a husband manipulates his wife into believing she is descending into madness. He dims the gaslights in their home, then insists she's imagining the flicker. He moves her belongings, then tells her she misplaced them. He isolates her, contradicts her, undermines her, until she no longer trusts her own eyes, her memory, her sanity. The horror of the film is not in the acts themselves, but in the quiet, relentless erosion of self-trust. And that same horror unfolds in real life, not in Victorian mansions, but in bedrooms, kitchens, text messages, and whispered conversations. Gaslighting is not a single lie. It is a pattern, a campaign of denial, misdirection, and contradiction so persistent that it warps your internal compass. You say, "You told me we'd spend the weekend together," and they reply, "I never said that. You're putting words in my mouth." You mention a hurtful comment they made, and they respond, "I was joking." You have no sense of humor. You recall a promise, a commitment, a shared understanding, and they look at you with genuine confusion, as if you've invented an entire reality that never existed. And because they remain calm, because they speak with such certainty, because they position themselves as the rational one, you begin to question your own perception. The cruelty of gaslighting lies in its invisibility. There is no paper trail, no recording, no witness. It happens in the space between words, in tone, in implication. It thrives in relationships where love and trust once existed, making the betrayal all the more disorienting. You don't suspect deception, you suspect yourself. You start keeping mental notes, recording conversations, saving texts, not because you're obsessive, but because you can no longer trust your memory. You replay moments in your mind like a film, searching for proof that you're not crazy. And when the narcissist continues to deny, minimize, or reverse the narrative, the doubt grows. It seeps into your bones. It whispers, "Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm losing my mind." Over time, gaslighting doesn't just distort memory, it alters identity. You become hesitant, tentative, afraid to speak unless you're certain. You second-guess your emotions, wondering if your anger is justified, if your sadness is too much, if your joy is misplaced. You stop trusting your instincts, those quiet inner signals that once guided you. And in their place, you begin to rely on the narcissist's version of reality, because it's the only one being consistently affirmed. They become the arbiter of truth. And you? You become a student of their reality, eager to please, desperate to align, terrified of being wrong. Philosophically, gaslighting is a form of epistemological violence, an attack not on the body, but on the very foundation of knowledge. It forces you to confront a terrifying question: if I can't trust what I see, hear, or remember, what can I trust? In a world where truth is increasingly mediated through relationships, institutions, and digital spaces, gaslighting reveals how fragile objectivity really is. We do not experience reality in isolation. We confirm it through others. When that confirmation is weaponized, when the person who should validate your experience instead denies it, the result is not just confusion, but existential instability. You are not just being lied to. You are being unmade. And the most insidious part is that gaslighting often feels like care. The narcissist may frame their denial as concern. "I'm worried about you. You've been so forgetful lately. Maybe you're stressed." This reframes the abuse as compassion, making it even harder to resist. To challenge them is not just to dispute a fact, it is to appear unstable, defensive, irrational. So you stay silent. You doubt. You withdraw. And the narcissist, meanwhile, remains the calm center, the voice of reason in your supposed chaos. But here, in this quiet moment, let us pause. Let your breath anchor you. Inhale slowly, exhale longer. Feel the weight of your body, the rise and fall of your chest. You are here. You are present. And no matter what has been denied, no matter what has been twisted, there is a truth that cannot be erased. You know what you experienced. You may not remember every word. You may not have proof. But you felt it. And feelings are not lies. They are data. They are signals from the deepest part of you, telling you that something is not right. Rest here. Let your breath be the thread that pulls you back to yourself. You do not need external validation to be real. You do not need permission to remember. You are not crazy. You are not broken. You are waking up. And now, as you begin to reclaim your truth, as you stand, however shakily, in the certainty of your own perception, the narcissist feels the ground shift beneath them. Their control is slipping. And so, they deploy their most devastating weapon, not rage, not silence, not lies, but collapse. They don't attack you. They attack themselves. They crumble. They weep. They say, after everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me? The seventh trick is not dominance, it is surrender. The seventh trick is victim positioning, where the abuser becomes the abused. Victim positioning, the role reversal. Turning blame into a shield. There comes a moment, fragile, pivotal, when you finally speak. After weeks, perhaps months, of swallowing your hurt, editing your words, softening your needs, you gather the courage to say what is true. I felt abandoned. I felt unseen. I needed you, and you weren't there. Your voice may tremble, but it is clear. You are not accusing. You are not attacking. You are simply asking for acknowledgement. For repair. For the most basic dignity, to be heard. And then, instead of response, there is collapse. The narcissist doesn't argue. They don't shout. They don't defend. They break. Their shoulders slump. Their voice cracks. Tears well, not of remorse, but of righteous sorrow. After everything I've done for you, they whisper, this is how you treat me? Or, I can't believe you'd say something like that when I've been carrying everything on my own. Or, you're supposed to be my safe place, and now you're hurting me like everyone else has. In an instant, the roles reverse. You, who came seeking connection, are now the aggressor. They, who caused the pain, are now the wounded. And you feel a cold wave of guilt crash over you, not because you did anything wrong, but because you dared to speak. This is victim positioning, the masterful inversion of power that occurs when a narcissist, faced with accountability, transforms themselves from perpetrator into martyr. It is not a slip. It is not a moment of vulnerability. It is a calculated performance, one so emotionally charged that it bypasses logic and strikes directly at the heart. The narcissist knows that most people, especially those with empathy, cannot bear to see someone in pain, especially someone they love. And so, they manufacture that pain, not to heal, but to manipulate. They don't want to fix the relationship. They want to end the confrontation. And the fastest way to do that is to make you feel like the villain. What makes this tactic so devastating is that it exploits our deepest moral instincts. We are taught, from childhood, to care for the hurting, to comfort the broken, to protect the vulnerable. Empathy is one of our most noble qualities, the very thing that binds us, that allows love to exist. But in the hands of a narcissist, empathy becomes a weapon turned against you. By positioning themselves as the victim, they force you into an impossible choice: either continue asserting your truth and risk appearing cruel, or retreat into silence to soothe their pain. And so, you choose silence. You apologize. You say, "I didn't mean to hurt you." You offer comfort. You stroke their hair, pour them tea, whisper that you're sorry, not for what you said, but for saying it at all. And in that moment, the cycle is complete. The abuser is soothed. The abused becomes the caretaker. The truth is buried beneath layers of guilt and misplaced compassion. You came seeking validation, and instead, you end up validating their suffering, the very suffering they claim you caused, even as they remain blind to the pain they inflicted. This reversal is not just disorienting, it is deforming. Over time, it teaches you that fairness is dangerous, that honesty is selfish, that love requires self-erasure. You begin to associate speaking your truth with chaos, with heartbreak, with becoming the bad one. And so, you stop. You swallow your words. You bury your needs. You become the calm one, the stable one, the one who holds the pieces, even as your own soul fractures in silence. The implications of victim positioning extend far beyond the personal. It mirrors the dynamics of oppressive systems, the way institutions deflect blame, the way abusers in power claim persecution when held accountable, the way entire narratives are rewritten so that the oppressor appears oppressed. In politics, in media, in families, we see this pattern again and again. When challenged, the powerful do not explain, they weep. They do not justify, they mourn. And in that mourning, they gather sympathy, deflect justice, and maintain control. Philosophically, victim positioning reveals a dark paradox. The person least capable of genuine vulnerability is often the one who performs it most dramatically. The narcissist does not feel guilt in the way we understand it, not as remorse for harm done, but as discomfort at having been exposed. Their tears are not for you. They are for the loss of control, the shattering of their perfect image. And so, they grieve, not their actions, but your refusal to uphold the illusion. But here, in this quiet space, let this truth settle: you can be kind without being complicit. You can offer compassion without surrendering your truth. You can witness pain without taking responsibility for it, especially when that pain is manufactured to manipulate. Empathy should not be a trap. It should not be a lever pulled to silence justice. Real empathy flows both ways. It does not demand that one person endlessly comfort the other while their own wounds go unacknowledged. Let this truth settle. Breathe into the space where you are allowed to speak, where your pain matters, where your boundaries are not betrayal, but integrity. You do not owe your silence to someone else's performance of suffering. You are not cruel for wanting fairness. You are not heartless for refusing to play a role that erases you. And now, as you begin to reclaim your voice, to stand in your truth despite the guilt, the rules shift once more. Just when you think you understand the game, the goalposts move. Yesterday's agreement is forgotten. Today's expectation is new, unspoken, impossible to meet. You follow the path, only to find the map has changed. This is not evolution. This is not growth. This is moving the goalposts, the eighth trick of the narcissist, where you can never win, because the finish line vanishes the moment you near it. Moving the goalposts, the impossible standard. You can never win. There is a quiet exhaustion that comes not from effort, but from futility, The kind that settles into your bones after running a race that keeps extending with every step you take. You begin with a clear path. If I do this, things will be okay. If I meet their need, we'll find balance. If I show up the way they want, they'll finally be satisfied. So you try. You adjust. You change. You call every day, just as they asked. You remember their favorite coffee. You listen without interrupting. You apologize when tensions rise, even when you're not sure you're at fault. You do the work. You walk the extra mile. And for a moment, fleeting, fragile, it feels like peace. But then, without warning, the peace dissolves. The goal has moved. Suddenly, calling every day isn't enough. You never text in the morning. Being attentive isn't sufficient. You don't initiate plans. Apologizing isn't healing. It feels forced. No matter what you do, it's no longer the right thing. A new demand appears, unspoken, unannounced, as if it had always been there and you simply failed to see it. And once again, you're behind. Once again, you've fallen short. Not because you stopped trying, but because the finish line vanished the moment you approached it. This is moving the goalposts, not a misstep, not a misunderstanding, but a deliberate, invisible shift in the rules of engagement. The narcissist does not want you to succeed. They want you to strive. Because in striving, you remain dependent. In striving, you stay engaged. In striving, you keep proving your worth, not because they value you, but because they need you to believe you must earn their approval. The goal is not resolution. The goal is motion. A treadmill with no off switch. A maze with no exit. Imagine standing before a door labeled acceptance. You're told, walk through when you've shown enough care. So you do, you listen, you support, you sacrifice. You open the door. But beyond it is not a room, not freedom, not peace, only another door, this one labeled loyalty. Ah, they say, but you haven't proven that yet. So you begin again. You stay up late to comfort them. You cancel plans to be there. You suppress your frustration. You walk through the second door, only to find a third, trust. Then a fourth, understanding. Then a fifth, perfection. Each time you meet the demand, the criteria evolve. The standard rises. The expectation deepens. And you, ever hopeful, ever devoted, keep walking, keep trying, keep believing that this time, you'll finally arrive. But arrival is an illusion. There is no destination. Only the path. Only the effort. Only the endless cycle of almost. The narcissist thrives in this space of perpetual inadequacy. Because as long as you feel you're not quite enough, you will never feel secure enough to leave. You will never question the relationship too deeply. You will never fully reclaim your autonomy. You remain, always, in a state of becoming, never whole, never complete, always one adjustment away from being loved the way you long to be. What makes this manipulation so psychologically corrosive is that it masquerades as growth. It sounds reasonable. You could be more present. You could try harder. You could understand me better. These are not inherently toxic statements. In healthy relationships, such reflections are invitations to mutual evolution. But in the hands of a narcissist, they become tools of entrapment, endless demands with no endpoint, no closure, no recognition. The feedback is never affirming. It is always corrective. You are not praised for progress. You are reminded of what's still lacking. And because you love them, because you want to be good, to be enough, to be worthy, you keep reaching, even as the ground beneath you shifts. Over time, this creates a profound internal distortion. You begin to equate love with labor. You start believing that your value is not inherent, but conditional, something to be earned through service, through sacrifice, through endless self-correction. You stop asking, "Am I being treated well?" and start asking, "What am I doing wrong?" Your self-worth becomes tethered to their satisfaction, and since their satisfaction is impossible to achieve, your worth becomes impossible to claim. Philosophically, this dynamic mirrors the broader anxieties of modern existence, the way society constantly redefines success just as we reach it. You earn the promotion, and suddenly, you need a better title. You buy the house, and now you must renovate. You achieve the goal, and the world whispers, "But what's next?" The narcissist replicates this cycle on an intimate scale, turning love into a performance with no final act, no applause, no rest. In doing so, they reveal a haunting truth. Many of us have been taught that we are not valuable as we are, that we must become before we are allowed to be. But here, in this quiet moment, let this truth settle. You do not need to earn your worth. You are not a project to be completed. You are not a problem to be solved. You are not a servant in someone else's emotional economy. You are not required to meet an ever-shifting standard to deserve love, respect, or peace. Pause. Breathe into the space where you didn't have to earn your worth, where you didn't have to prove anything, where you could simply exist. Not as a performance, not as a promise, but as a presence. Imagine a life where you were allowed to stop striving, where enough wasn't a future tense, but a present truth. And now, as you begin to awaken, as you see the patterns, the tricks, the traps, you may feel a quiet resolve forming. You may consider stepping back, walking away, choosing yourself. But just as you reach the edge of freedom, the past pulls you back. Not with force, not with threats, but with a whisper. A message. A memory. A promise of change. The narcissist doesn't let go. They hoover you back in. The ninth trick is named after a vacuum, the Hoover Effect. The Hoover Effect, sucking you back in. False promises of change. There is a fragile peace that follows departure, not immediate, not easy, but real. After months, perhaps years, of walking on eggshells, of swallowing your truth, of measuring your worth by someone else's shifting moods, you finally step away. You cut the cord. You silence the notifications. You reclaim your time, your space, your breath. And slowly, like the first light after a long winter night, healing begins. You sleep deeper. You speak more freely. You rediscover parts of yourself that had been buried beneath guilt and confusion. You start to believe, tentatively, cautiously, that you might be free. And then, it comes. A message. A call. A social media story that feels too pointed to be accidental. "I've changed. I'm in therapy. I miss you. You were the only one who ever really understood me." The words arrive softly, gently, wrapped in the language of growth and remorse. It feels like hope. Like redemption. Like the love you once believed in has finally matured, finally awakened. Maybe this time will be different. Maybe they've done the work. Maybe the cycle can end. But this is not a second chance. This is the Hoover Effect, named not for a man, but for a vacuum cleaner, a machine designed to suck things back in. The narcissist, having discarded you when you ceased to serve their need for control or admiration, now finds themselves in an emotional void. Their supply has dried up. The mirror is gone. And without someone to reflect their inflated self-image, they begin to destabilize. The grandiosity wavers. The loneliness bites. The emptiness echoes. And so, they return, not out of love, not out of genuine insight, but out of desperation. They don't want you. They want what you gave: attention, validation, a stage for their performance of self. The Hoover Effect is not spontaneous. It is strategic. It arrives at the moment you're most vulnerable, when you've softened, when you remember the good times more clearly than the pain, when your heart dares to believe in transformation. The message is carefully crafted, full of just enough vulnerability to feel real, just enough promise to ignite hope. They may mention therapy, though you'll never see proof. They may apologize, though the apology centers their pain, not your harm. They may even cry, recount their loneliness, their regret, their newfound clarity. But notice, they rarely take full responsibility. Rarely name their manipulation. Rarely offer restitution. Instead, they offer potential, the intoxicating idea that this time, it could be different. And that idea is powerful. Because love, even toxic love, imprints on the nervous system. The brain does not distinguish between healthy and harmful attachment by logic alone. It remembers the intensity, the passion, the moments of idealization, the dopamine floods, the whispered promises, the feeling of being everything to someone. Trauma bonds are not broken by reason. They are broken by repetition, by time, by the slow erosion of illusion. And so, when the Hoover comes, the body remembers before the mind does. Your pulse quickens. Your breath catches. You begin to wonder, what if they've really changed? What if I was too harsh? What if I gave up too soon? This is where the manipulation becomes most dangerous. The Hoover isn't just a lure, it's an exploitation of your deepest longing, to be loved well, to see goodness prevail, to believe that people can grow. The narcissist knows this. They know you want to believe in redemption. And so, they wear the costume of it. They mimic change so convincingly that even those who have seen through the mask can waver. You may respond. You may meet them. You may let them back into your world, not because you've forgotten the past, but because you dare to hope for a future that never existed. But the cycle doesn't change. It repeats. The love bombing returns, the affection, the flattery, the declarations of destiny. And once you're re-entangled, once your guard is down, the old patterns resume, the neglect, the gaslighting, the silent treatment, the moving goalposts. The only difference is that this time, the fall is harder, because you gave them a second chance. You believed in the lie of transformation. And now, the betrayal cuts deeper. Philosophically, the Hoover Effect reveals a tragic truth: some people cannot love without control. Their emotional survival depends on having a source of narcissistic supply, someone to admire them, soothe them, reflect them. They do not seek partnership. They seek sustenance. And when that sustenance is gone, they don't grieve, they replenish. The return is not about you. It is about their emptiness. Your presence is not desired for who you are, but for what you provide: a mirror, a witness, a vessel for their fragile sense of self. And yet, even knowing this, the pull can be overwhelming. Because love is not just emotion. It is memory. It is habit. It is the phantom limb of a relationship that once felt like home. The Hoover doesn't just manipulate, it reactivates the trauma bond, reigniting the neurological pathways that associate pain with intimacy, chaos with passion, absence with longing. Rest in this moment. Breathe into the truth that is not shaped by their return. You are not responsible for their emptiness. You are not obligated to witness their collapse. You are not a fixer. You are not a savior. You are not a mirror to be used and discarded. Healing is not linear. It is okay if you waver. It is okay if the message stirred something in you. But remember, love that is real does not need to suck you back in. It invites you forward. It waits for you. It respects your boundaries. It does not vanish and return like a tide that only comes to erode the shore. And now, as you strengthen your resolve, as you choose yourself, again and again, the narcissist faces a truth they cannot bear: you are gone. Not temporarily. Not conditionally. But finally. And when all tricks fail, when hoovering does not work, when you refuse to be pulled back into the cycle, they do not mourn. They do not reflect. They do not let go. Instead, they rewrite the story. They erase you. The 10th and final trick is not quiet. It is not subtle. It is not private. It is smear campaigning, where your reputation becomes their revenge. Smear campaigning, erasing your truth, destroying you to save their image. You leave. Not dramatically. Not with a fight. But quietly, with a breath you didn't realize you'd been holding for years. You step out of the storm, into stillness. You begin to heal. You reconnect with old friends, return to forgotten passions, relearn the rhythm of your own heartbeat. And for the first time in a long time, you feel like yourself, not the version they shaped, not the reflection they demanded, but the quiet, steady truth beneath it all. And then, slowly, you begin to notice it. A mutual friend grows distant. A cousin asks, "Are you okay?" with a tone that suggests they already know the answer. A coworker avoids eye contact. Someone mentions, casually, "I heard things got really intense between you two." Another says, "I'm just glad they're finally safe." And you freeze. Because you know, without being told, that the story being told is not yours. It is a distortion. A fabrication. A carefully constructed narrative in which you are the villain, and the narcissist, the one who manipulated, controlled, and discarded you, is the hero. This is smear campaigning, not idle gossip, not a moment of anger, but a systematic, premeditated campaign to destroy your reputation. It is not spontaneous. It is not emotional. It is strategic. The narcissist, unable to tolerate the loss of control and the threat to their carefully curated image, retaliates not with confrontation, but with erasure. They cannot admit fault. To do so would shatter the illusion of perfection they depend on to feel real. So instead, they rewrite reality. They paint you as unstable, as irrational, as abusive, as the one who ruined a good thing. They claim they tried so hard, that you pushed them away, that you were controlling or emotionally volatile. They may even say you gaslit them, that you isolated them, that you were the one who played the victim. And because they are often charming, consistent, and skilled at emotional manipulation, people believe them. Especially those who never saw the private moments, the silent treatments, the shifting goalposts, the calculated flattery followed by cold withdrawal. To the outside world, the narcissist appears calm, reasonable, even wounded. You, by contrast, may have been the one who finally broke silence, who expressed pain, who set boundaries, actions that, twisted, can be framed as aggression. And so, the narrative takes hold. You are the problem. They are the survivor. What makes smear campaigning so devastating is that it doesn't just attack your reputation, it isolates you. Friends you've known for years drift away, not because they don't care, but because they believe they're protecting the narcissist from a toxic presence. Family members side with the one who seems more composed, more rational, more likable. Support systems dissolve. You find yourself not only grieving the relationship, but grieving the community that once surrounded you. You are not just left alone, you are made to feel like the reason others are suffering. This is not merely cruelty. It is psychological warfare. The narcissist does not grieve your departure, they punish it. And the punishment is not directed at your body, but at your identity. By erasing your truth, they ensure that even if you speak, no one will believe you. They turn your past into a minefield of doubt. They make you question whether you should even try to defend yourself, because to do so risks appearing defensive, angry, crazy. And so, many victims stay silent, not out of guilt, but out of exhaustion. The battle is not fair. Truth is no match for perception. Philosophically, smear campaigning reveals the darkest core of narcissism. Image is more real than truth. For the narcissist, how they are seen is not just important, it is their reality. To admit fault, to show vulnerability, to acknowledge harm, these are not acts of growth, but existential threats. It would mean stepping out of the role of the hero, the victim, the misunderstood genius, roles they've spent a lifetime perfecting. And so, rather than face that collapse, they destroy the one who threatens it. You are not erased because you were dangerous, you are erased because you were real. You saw behind the mask. You named the manipulation. You walked away. And in doing so, you became a threat to the illusion. This dynamic echoes far beyond personal relationships. It mirrors the ways institutions, leaders, and public figures protect themselves by discrediting whistleblowers, silencing critics, rewriting history. The smear campaign is not unique to narcissists. It is a tool of power used wherever truth threatens control. And in the intimate sphere, it is perhaps most insidious because it weaponizes love, friendship, and trust to isolate and silence. But here, in this quiet space, let this truth anchor you. You are not what they said. You are not the story they told to make themselves feel safe. You are not the monster invented to justify their cruelty. You are not responsible for their need to lie. Your worth is not measured by their narrative, nor by the opinions of those who believed it. As we close, breathe deeply. Let each inhale carry you back to yourself. You are not what they said. You are not what they made you doubt. You are here. You are real. And you are free. Not because the pain is gone. Not because the wounds are healed. But because you have remembered who you are. Not through their eyes. Not through the world's judgment. But through the quiet, unshakable knowing within. These 10 tricks, the mirroring, the silence, the flattery, the gaslighting, the smear, are not just tools of manipulation. They are reflections of deeper human fears. Of being unseen. Of being abandoned. Of not being enough. The narcissist does not create these fears. They exploit them. But awareness is the first step toward liberation. As you drift off, remember, you are not broken. You were loved in a broken way. And now you can rest. Let go. Breathe. And sleep.